Alright, so now we're ready to do our light layer. What we're going to do is create a new layer that's on top of our line art and everything else. We're going to leave it set to normal, and I'm going to go ahead and take the round brush, just a normal round brush, and adjust one of the settings here. I'm under the pencil tab, and I'm going to adjust the size so that I have the ability to get smaller and bigger the harder I push, okay? And then we're going to turn the opacity down just a little bit on it, okay? So, have this brush now. And what we're going to do, we're going to, let's start over here on his eye, okay? We're going to color pick one area of this, and really quick, I'm going to also lower the opacity on that drawing layer a little bit. So we're going to color pick part of the eye, okay? And to do the highlight, all you're going to do is move the light a little bit warmer, because we're using a warm light source like the sun, and a little bit brighter, okay? And you're going to come in here and just go ahead and start painting in. Oh, make sure you're on the right layer here. Start painting in any light that would be here, okay? So, thinking about where the light source is coming from, where it would be hitting, and where the brightest spots are going to be. Thinking about the texture here, okay? And you're just going to come in and start painting all of that in. And if you need to, I'm even going to make this a little brighter. And every time you move to a new section, what you're going to want to do is repick your colors again, because you really want this to stay accurate. So under here, underneath his eye, I'm coming in and adding the highlights. You can see I'm kind of breaking it up because I want it to feel like there's some texture going on. I don't want it to just be perfectly smooth. I'm also thinking now that there's actually going to be a little bit of a shadow underneath that eye there, so I'm not going to put a lot of light. Okay. But the top of all of these little bumps on his eye here, definitely want to bring those out. Okay. Select this color, warm and brighten things up a bit. Probably go even brighter there. The bottom edge of his mouth here, or the top edge, sorry. Really want that light to pick up there. Alright, looking good. Let's do some areas over here on his jaw. And this step is probably going to take a long time, right? Because we have to get in here and get all these details, but it's going to be worth it. Right? Just go ahead and take your time and make sure everything is looking right. It looks good. Don't just try and rush through it to get it done. Okay? Let's go over here to the back of his head here. We can do this blue area. Let's move a little warmer, a little brighter. Alright, excellent. It's looking good. Let's move back over here to the front of his face. There's a few spots that I want to brighten up a little bit here on his mouth. Get a few of these scales here that could use a little bit of a brighter edge on top. Excellent. Let's move on up here to some of these spots on his head. So I'm going to color pick this. We're going to bring it warmer, brighter, and we'll just kind of have that fade out there. The brightest part is going to be right there at the top of the turning point of the ridge there. Same thing on this other side over here as well. And then up the middle ridge of his head. And then little bright spots on these little scales we got here. And at this point also, we should note that we are on a normal layer, and so you can start to kind of paint over some of the line here. Okay, because we do want to eventually have that covered up, so you can see I'm not being worried to cover that with our light layer. Okay. I'm still saving those horns. We're going to still do those on their very own separate layer, so don't worry about those for now. We will get them eventually, but for now we can go ahead and just sort of leave them where they are. Alright, so that's looking pretty good for the face. You can see we went along and got most of that stuff there lit up really nicely. And you're just going to have to go through the whole entire image and do the same thing. So that being said, let's go ahead and move on. Alright, so we're going to move on to some of these parts down here on his neck. So as usual, we move things warmer and a little brighter. And we just come in and start to paint in some of these details, some of the tips of these wrinkles and folds here, right, where they start to sort of catch the light. Constantly recolor picking to make sure that we're getting the right colors of the lighting, right? We still want it to feel real and accurate. Okay. So we keep making sure to do that. So warmer. Now, we went over warm and cools, but just to clarify what I mean by that, by warmer and cooler, I'm moving it closer towards the color of the light source, which happens to be warm. Okay. So our light source is a yellowish color, and so whenever I make it a little warmer, I move it towards that yellow side of things. So whatever direction that is, that's just the direction it gets moved towards. That doesn't mean that it's going towards, it has to become yellow, right? You could see this is still green, but we just moved it closer towards yellow on the spectrum. Okay. But that doesn't mean it has to be a yellow color in order to shade with it, right? Like right now we're shading with a green color, earlier we were shading with or lighting with more of a brown color, right? So it doesn't have to be exactly whatever your light source is, okay? Because it's going to interact with the surface, the local color, to create a new color. Okay, your light source has to be really, really bright, and your surface has to be pretty reflective in order for it to just completely change to match the color of the light source. So what I'm doing here is just working in this lighting. It's a little bit green because I want it to be sort of reflective here. Okay. Some of these wrinkles here. Hitting the tops of some of these scales. I just bring out the light in them. Okay. Excellent. Hit some of these scales up here as well. It's excellent. I'm going to come back down a little bit closer towards yellow, even though it's already in the warm range, right? It's already a warm color, but I just wanted it to get closer to the color of what its light source is, which happens to be warm, so that we can begin to really get some of that feeling in there of the light actually bouncing off some of this stuff here. I'm kind of breaking up the lines a little bit too, so it's not so perfectly smooth. So we can get a little bit more texture in here. Excellent. Let's move on to his back here. Some of these scales. So these little tiny spikes that we did here, I'm also going to end up doing those on a separate layer. It'll just be easier to kind of get what we're looking for. So I'm ignoring those for now, but we will end up coming back to work on them. But for now, I'm not going to really worry too much about them. Just kind of painting over them like they aren't there. And then later we can sort of come back and fix that. I remember at this point, I'm okay to start painting over some of these lines as well. Alright, starting to hit the top of some of these scales. Even kind of making some scales up as we go that we maybe didn't actually end up drawing in there the first time, but it would make sense for them to be there. We can just go ahead and light areas as if it was a scale, and then just end up coming back to shade it as necessary. Just moving along down his back here. And I haven't really picked a new color in a while because this is, for the most part so far, staying pretty much in the same range. So I don't really need to pick anything new quite yet. Excellent. Let's go ahead and scale that down for a second so we can look at it, make sure everything is working out all right. I'm actually going to take my airbrush and just sort of knock down the bottom edge of this a little bit. Okay. And then brighten up some of these scales here. These areas on his, like his shoulder area. Okay. We really want this part to be pretty bright as to how much light it's getting, which we still have other layers of light to do, so we don't need to get it all on the first pass, but I do want this to feel like it's coming out. There's a little bit more form there. Okay. All right, let's do this hand down here. Bring my brush size down a little bit. Knocking in these little scales down here on his hands, his fingers. Okay. And then we can do his claws as well. Which actually, you know what? I keep forgetting we're going to also do those on a separate layer, so we don't have to worry about those for now. Oops. Let's move on over here. Some of these areas on his back I still think need to have a little bit more attention to them, so we're going to rework them some more. Okay. Start to hit some of these areas on his wings, or at least on the arms of his wings. Get this back here. And then we're going to catch just a little bit of that edge over there on this side as well. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead. Where do we want to move to next? You always want to kind of bring things back down for a minute to see how they're looking in the overall scheme of your lighting to make sure that you're not missing any parts that need to be lit a little better. So for example, I'm thinking that some of these areas down here just need a little bit more light to them, to the scales. So I'm going to do just that and sort of help pump things up. Okay. Alright, that looks good. Let's go ahead and move on to this arm here. Warmer, brighter. And then down the center, we're going to have this really bright reflective highlight on these scales that we want to emphasize. And we have these little ridges that come along that we want to get as well. Painting over some more of the line art there. Down here on his foot now. Let's do this other foot while we're down here. And this part, I think I do need to knock back a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Where are we at now? Let's go ahead and work on, we have some areas in here we can lighten up. So let's do that. Alright, let's do the tops of his wings up here. And I guess I keep calling it a him. It could be a she. I just always see sharp, spiky stuff, and I think that it's a boy. And do this top of this wing since it's the same color. We got a little yellower and a little brighter. Really want this part to be pretty bright, where it's really catching a lot of this light here. Make that more yellow, that a bit brighter. You want to try and get as close as you can with your colors on this layer, because you're not really going to want to go back and do too much adjustments with your layer settings. You can do maybe a little bit, but for the most part, your best bet's going to be to try and keep this as close to your first pass as possible, so that everything looks accurate, right? Because it's everything specifically color picked in reference to another color that you put down. And if you're changing all of that, you run the risk of kind of messing up your palette and all that work you did. So you want to be a little careful when you do that. Make sure you're not taking things too drastically. But I mean, you can do it a little bit. Just be careful with it. That's all. Getting these wings in here. This green. Alright, really pump that up there. Okay, I'm also going to use the same green up here on some of these parts on his back, just because I really like that color that it's given me. Alright, so we're almost done with the reptile. Let's go ahead and move on to his legs here. Let's go ahead and get that nice bright green saturated color. And you can start hitting some of these parts of his leg here. Alright, just knocking in these scales right here. Let's do these ones back here. This blue color. Saturate a little more. So even though you can see that we're painting with a green color, it makes it look like the blue is being hit with a yellow light. You're gonna knock him back just a little bit though. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit the, oh, you know what, before I forget, there's an area up here we need to get, so I'm going to get the bright green we were using earlier and just hit that wing right there. Okay, there we go. Now we can come down, let's do the tail. Bright green, move a little warmer, a little brighter. Hit a few of these scale tops here that would be getting hit by the light as I start to round the edge a little bit. Okay, then we got this red area in here. We can brighten up. Awesome, so if we shrink that down nice and small, we should be able to get a pretty good idea of what it's looking like so far. Okay, and we're going to do just a little bit of adjustment here. That's a little bit too bright. Mess with the saturation just a tiny bit. Bring up the brightness just a little bit as well. Okay. So you can see how big of a difference already that's making. And there are a few parts that I want to knock back a little bit that maybe are just a little bit too bright. I think that helps make it look a little better. And then now we just have to do the log real quick, so let's do that. This part in the end is going to end up being out of focus, so I'm not going to spend too much time really rendering this to look super nice or anything like that, because like I said, we won't really be able to see a lot of it by the time it's finished. The final image is done. So I will do some though. We do still want it to, even if it's out of focus, it still needs to kind of read as being lit. So we'll still do the log here real quick. There we go. So that looks pretty good for our light layer. I'm happy with it. Turned out nicely. I am going to really quick over here though. I see some shadows that I want to adjust just a little bit. So for example, some of these areas over here on his eye I think go a little too dark. So I'm just going to clean them up a little bit, erase them out, and then let's come back to our light layer. And I want to push a little bit more highlights in here and maybe soften up that real hard edge there just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Fantastic, that looks really great. And let's do one quick pass again just to make sure we got everything that we wanted to get, that everything's lit correctly. And we'll shrink it down for a minute. Make sure it's reading well, like it has some form there. I do think while we're here, let's go to our multiply layer. We're gonna set this to normal really quick so we can color pick what we need. Let's find a nice good deep spot here because we want to go back and add a few shadows really quick. So for example, under here in his belly really needs to be pushed quite a bit darker. Okay. As well as some of these spots under here, I think. Maybe not so much under his chin. We can probably leave that a little bit lighter than there. I think definitely over here some more. It could go a little darker. Alright. Perfect. So, there we go. That's it for this lecture. I'll see you guys in the next one.